And welcome everyone, and thank you for joining another DevTest community webcast. Today's topic is the DevTest integration with ALM. Today we have Surya Suravarapu on the line. He'll be giving the presentation today. If you have any questions as we're going through today's session, you can go ahead and ask those questions in the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you do have any questions you'd rather ask over the phone, we will be opening the line up for that later in today's session. So if you have anything you'd rather ask verbally, you can hold it until the end of today's session. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to turn the call over to Surya. Take it away, Surya.
Thanks, Melanie. Good morning, one and all. I'm Surya, and I'm part of the customer advocacy group here at CA, as part of which we work with customers and help them with implementing best practices and making sure that they're up to date and running in terms of the software. All right, so let's get started without any delay. So today we'll talk about DevTest HP ALM integration. This will be the agenda. So a little bit on HP ALM, and then what is the integration, why we need this integration, the types of integration that we have, and how the integration works, how does it actually work, and the installation utility, then how to configure the integration. Then we'll look at how to debug issues when you face some issues. Then we'll follow by a quick demo, and then we'll have the Q&A. So that will be the agenda for today's session. So HPALM, previously it was known as QC. Now it's called Application Lifecycle Management. And it helps teams gain insights, and it helps teams collaborate across SDLC, and release faster with quality. That's again how it helps. And and one of the critical features or the important features of this is the test management piece of it, which is it helps in test planning, execution and defect tracking. I'm sure many organizations actually use HP QC to track defects and release quality. And some of the other features are project management, agile project management, lifecycle intelligence, and it also provides open source integrations. So that's a bit on HPALM, and like I said, QC is actually used across organizations for tracking defects. So what is the integration? The integration happens via a DevTest ALM plugin. So these plugins are packaged with DevTest, and using that you'll be able to integrate with ALM when you install that plugin. So it actually helps you to load and run DevTest test cases as QC test from ALM. So all of your DevTest test cases that you develop, you can actually run them from ALM itself as a QC test. So we'll look at how we can do that, but that's what the integration really is. So it actually combines the power of DevTest, the power of application test DevTest, where you can trigger different tests. It combines the power of DevTest with QC features. That's what it really helps with. So the plugin supports 64 and 32-bit installation. So starting DevTest 9.1, we have 64-bit plugin also. Earlier we had a 32-bit plugin only, and teams who would like to take advantage of 64-bit DevTest had the challenge, but now we support both. Why do we need this integration? Like I said, HPALM is widely used by enterprises to track tests and defects. So they would like to, what we've heard is that the organizations would like to track defects at one place, our test results, everything in one place. So if they're using HPALM for their, in their enterprise, they'd like to track even DevTest execution results there. So that, so that is why, we have this integration, which helps, like I said, run DevTest test cases as a QC test from ALM. And it helps in managing tests, tracking results in one place, and that was why we have that integration built in. So let's get into the types of integration. For HPALM, let's say 12.2 and beyond, we have we support with DevTest 9.1 and later. So we have the 3 plugins, which are the DevTest ALM plugin 64-bit. Then we have the DevTest ALM plugin 32-bit, and what we need is the .NET 4.5 runtime or later. And if you have an older version of ALM and older versions of DevTest, I'm sure you're familiar with the TD plugin, which we used to basically do the integration earlier, and it uses the minimum requirement is a .NET 2.0 runtime for that. And TD plugin of course supports only 32-bit that way. So how does this integration actually work? I'm not sure if you're able to view this clearly. I'll try. You can probably zoom in. So what happens is QC client retrieves the test from ALM server. So ALM server is where all of the tests are stored. So the QC client retrieves the test from the ALM server. Now these ALM tests are in turn mapped into DevTest tests. So how do you map these? So for this ALM test, we provide the details like the MAR file details, like the path or the MAR file or the MAR info file, or you could also directly give the path of the test file, config file, and staging file. So you'll give those paths in the ALM test. So that's how it maps into DevTest. Now, using the plugin, so when you run a test in ALM, the plugin in turn will actually, based on the mappings that you have provided, it will be able to trigger the DevTest run. Now, when you trigger a DevTest run, based on we'll actually provide the details of the coordinator also in the configuration. So when you run the DevTest test, it gets staged on the coordinator, and simulators obviously will execute the test, and it's in turn DevTest is logging metrics in the DB. Now once this is done, the results of the test run will be sent back from the registry to QC. So you will see ultimately the results after the test execution in QC. You'll be able to see the results, and as always, you can always take advantage of the powerful reporting capabilities that we have in DevTest. You can go into test reports and look at the actual test execution reports in DevTest also if you'd like to do so. But then in QC also we track the results, so you can see the results of the test execution. So this is how the actual flow works in terms of the integration. Okay, let's get into the next slide. So what is the installation utility? So with the plugin, the plugin installer actually uses what we call as an installation utility. So once you install the plugin, you can see that available in your machine. So what it helps is, it helps with registering the plugin, and it creates the DevTest connection.properties file. Now DevTest connection.properties file is where, I was talking about, where you have like the coordinator details and the the port name and the host of your DevTest installation server, and the user details, password details. All of that information gets stored in the DevTest connection.properties files. Now if you'd like to change the connection information, then what you do is you can change the connection information, and if you just run this utility, the installation utility, it will generate a new encrypted password based on the changed details of like the username or the password. So once you change the details, it will just recreate the file, and you can use that. I mean, if you'd like to connect to a remote host or whatever, you can change the connection details in this properties file. So that's what it helps with. It helps with recreating this file. So how do you configure this integration? First thing is obviously making sure that you have the required runtime, .NET runtime available on your machine. Then you install the ALM QC client-side components. So we'll see that. Once I actually I'll show you in QC. When you go into tools, you'll see that there are some. You have to register the plugin, and you need to basically install the client-side component. I'll show that. So you'll have to do that. And then of course, either you already have DevTest installed or you need to install DevTest, and you define the Lisa_home environment variable in your machine, which points to your Lisa home. Then next thing is to install the ALM plugin. Like I said, inside your DevTest installer, in add-ons, in your DevTest home, under add-ons, under QC, you'll see the plugins there. You can use that installer depending on your machine environment, or operating system. Operating system instance, whether it's a 64-bit or 32-bit. Based on that, you can make a determination and install the required plugin, and then make sure that the DevTest services are running. This is the installation. Then how do you set up DevTest tests in QC? So before you set up the test, make sure you verify the installation. So in order to verify the installation, you need to verify that you have an ALM plugin folder created inside your DevTest. We'll look at all that. So make sure that you have the ALM plugin folder inside your DevTest, and inside which you should have a DevTest connection.properties. So during the installation, you will provide the details of the coordinator server and user password, everything, based on which it creates this file. So you need to make sure this file is there, and then make sure that within bin you'll have the installation utility related files, and then inside your doc folder. So in DevTest you have a doc folder also, inside which you should see 2 script templates. One is a JavaScript script template and a VB script template. So we look at those. So these script templates are which will have the actual script that you would have to use to configure a test in QC. So we look at how to configure that, but you need to make sure these 2 files are present also. So this is how you verify the installation. And I was talking about the HP connectivity add-in and registering HP ALM client. So you can do that here. So basically this is again in your tools section, like I said, you can actually install these 2. We'll look at that how to do that. So you register your HP ALM client and install the QC connectivity add-in. And after that, it's just like your regular test where you go to your ALM test plan folder, create a test. But in this case, you'll have to select the test type as vAPI XP test. So this is the type of test that you need to select. Once you select that, you'll be able to add the test script. Like I said, you have a script template. So depending on the language of your choice, you could take the script off of the JavaScript file or the VB script file and add the script to the test script. Now this is a pre-configured script that you get once you install the plugin, which actually ensures that ALM is able to run your DevTest test cases. So you need to add this script to your test case. And once you add that, you need to add references to your test staging config or your MAR or MAR-info in attachments tab. So in attachments tab, you define them as URLs and just you add that path. So we look at that also. That's how you configure the integration. All of this is present in the documentation. You can just follow the steps in the documentation. And I'm just trying to replicate the same here. So once you create the test, to execute, you create a test set, and you can actually select the test that you'd like to add. Now, if you just want to execute one test, you can add one test. But if you have multiple tests that you want to execute, you can add them to the test set, and you can run the test. And results you will see in the test run, and you can actually also look for a report for the execution in DevTest. And the screens kind of show how this works, but we'll go through that. In the demo I'll show how to run the test and how the results will show up. Now debugging. So you've run the test. Now how do you know that the actual run test ran well? Of course you can see the result, but let's say you get an error. Now how do you know what is the error and all that, right? So we have what we call as an ALM devtest.log. It is under ALM plugin folder in DevTest home. So in that folder, this file gets generated, and here you'll see the details of the test execution. And you can see in case of an error, you can see an error, in what actually happened and why the test failed. You can see those errors here. So you can use this to debug. In addition, we have an integrated debugger in ALM, which you can use. In the test plan folder, you have that, and you can use that to actually debug your test, and you'll see the results in the output pane when you actually run the test cases. And if these 2 also don't help you much in terms of what is happening, then this may be a more internal to ALM, this issue maybe. Then you can actually look at ALM server logs from your ALM admin. You can ask them, and he can look it up in the server logs. In case your DevTest log or the integrated debugger doesn't really help identifying the issue, you can actually go into ALM server logs where you'll get more detailed information on what's happening. It may be internal to ALM. So. All right. So I know we discussed a lot of items, so we can quickly jump into the demo where I will actually show all of the different items that we discussed on configuration, and I'll actually even run a test for us to verify how the test execution works. All right, let me share my screen. Melanie, are you able to see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Thank you. All right. Now let's actually look at first, where do we have this plugin, right? So if you go to DevTest, add-ons, QC, you will see the plugins here. Now, if you're not able to view my screen, try to zoom in your WebEx so that you can view it. But yeah, so here you can see the plugins, and depending on whether it's a 64-bit or 32-bit operating system, you can actually install the required plugin. DevTest installation also, of course, and you can install the required plugin. This is one thing. Now, once you install, I was talking about a folder called ALM Plugin. Like I said, this folder gets created, inside which you'll have the DevTest connection.properties. This file is where you'll have the host name, username, password details, your coordinator name, port, and all that information. So this gets generated, based on the information you provide during the install. This file gets generated. And once you start executions, you'll start seeing the DevTest log here. Let me quickly open it up so that I can show you. As you can see, it talks about that the runner has started, the Lisa runner has initialized, and then the whole, step by step on the test execution, how much time it took, whether the cycle, the details of the execution. You can see all of those details here in the ALM devtest.log. Now, in addition, we spoke about the scripts. If you go into doc folders after your install, you'll see the script templates. Like I was showing you the VB script template. So this is the script, VB script. You have a corresponding JavaScript template also. So you can actually pick the script from here, and you'll have to configure in DevTest. We'll look at in ALM. So we'll look at how to configure in ALM. So this is basically, in DevTest, once you install, this is what you'll see. And let's go into ALM. So this is, we have our ALM instance here, 12.53. So as you can see, I already have a test created in the interest of time. So I can show you what all you need to configure. So you'll basically, when you create a test, when you create a new test, so you'll have to select it as you can see, VAPI XP test. This is what you need to select the test name as. And you can just give in the test name, VAPI XP test, and you can just click finish. So I already have a test configured, so let's look at that, a sample weather test. Now, once you configure the test as VAPI XP, one thing is also to, so you go into test script tab. So here you will have a default test script that ALM provides. You'll have to replace that with one of the scripts, either a JavaScript or VB script, depending on what you'd want. You can pick the test script from there, paste it here. So this is what, like I said, will help you run DevTest test as ALM test. So this script will run that. Now, once you've added the script, the next thing is to, of course, provide details of your DevTest test, right? So you've configured the script, but for it to execute, you need to provide those details. Those details you provide under attachments. So you go into attachments. In this case, I've not provided the MAR directly. I've provided the test case. As you can see, you basically create a URL, like you see here. You click on it. Okay, so I have to check out the test. But anyway, so you click on this, it will help you create the URL, and you can provide the details. For example, here, this is the format that you need to provide it as. Let me copy it into a notepad so that I can show it to you. So the format is file : / and then you provide the path to the in the machine where you have the file. So I've provided the path for the test case. Similarly, you provide the path for the staging doc. Here I'm just using the default staging doc, which is one user, one cycle staging doc, and then you also provide the path to the project config. So you can provide all these three, and once you provide this, now this has provided the path to the files, right, to ALM. So that is the next thing you configure. So once you configure the script and the attachments, now you have pretty much configured, what is required for you to run the test. So in test plan, basically you will create the test. So once you are done creating the test, the next thing is, let's try running the test. How do you run that? So you go into the test lab, and here you can create a test set and add the test. So I've already created a test set called DevTest, and I've added one test here, called weather that we just created, right? So this is the test that I've created, and here it's showing execution from last run, right? So last run, this is the execution result. Now let's quickly run this. You can run the test state, and I'm running on the same host here. So you can just say run or run all. Basically, if you have multiple tests, you can say run all. I only have one test under that, so I'm running it. So as you can see, now here also you can see the details, the output. Basically that it's running the test right now. Let me try to expand this. Okay, so it has run and it has passed. So now let's look at the details of the test. So as you can see now, the current run report is whatever I ran just now. The last run report, you can see here itself. You can see the last run report. Right now, you can also see that under test runs. When you see, you'll see the details of all the tests that executed. So this is the most recent one. Now when I click on it, I can see that the test is successfully passed. And here in the test, let's say if you add some assertions, it will even provide you the results of the assertions. Now what is the expected thing? So in the assertion, I'm looking for city found, in the result. So then, it will actually see ensure result contains string. So what is it that you see? And we can see that the city found is already there here. So it will provide you the expected result and the actual result. And you can see that. And if you have any description for each and every step, it will provide that. In our test, in the test that I configured, I only have one step. But if you have multiple steps, it will provide you multiple steps here. And each of the step, it will provide you the status. You'll see that what is happening, and like did an assertion fail or whatever. So you can see those details in the run report. You can see those details. Now if you go back to, so this is again, so how you're seeing it here. And let me see if I can bring up. As you can see here, you can see I was talking about, in DevTest also, since, it's running as DevTest. You saw the result in ALM. You can see the results also in DevTest here. Click on it and it will show you each and every step details of what was executed. This is the request that was sent in. This was the response that came back. And then the assertions and the results of the assertions, result is true. So you can see all those details even in DevTest. And you can, like I said, you can even go into your reports and you can view the report of the execution also. As you can see, so I ran the test. It's showing the assertion reports, and it's basically providing you test execution details. So you can see these reports. You can export these reports. So basically that is how you are able to run a test, and you are able to even view the test execution reports in DevTest as well as in ALM. You can actually track the results. Like in ALM also you see that. So this helps you keep track of your test executions, and you're able to run tests as DevTest tests as ALM tests. So that was a quick run through the demo and how the execution actually happens. Now, if you have any questions, I think we can take that at this time.
Hey, this is Victor. I have a question.
Sure.
This plugin need to be installed in both the end, DevTest as well as ALM, or it has to be installed at one place?
No, it just has to be on where you have DevTest, because this plugin is for your it's just for your DevTest to interact with ALM. So you don't need, this is a DevTest plugin, so you only install it at DevTest and not at ALM.
Okay.
So ALM end, like I mentioned, you need to let me quickly show that. So you go into ALM tools. I forgot to show this. So let me share my screen real quick. I'll show what needs to be done at ALM end.
Because you are running the script from ALM, right? So there should be some plugin needed from ALM side as well, right?
No, I mean it's nothing DevTest specific. In ALM, what you do is, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
So here you need to do a HP ALM client registration. So how do you end up here? So you can click on help. This will show up, and you click on add ALM tools. This will show up. So you basically need to first do a HP ALM client registration. Once that is done, you run this HP ALM connectivity. This is again from ALM end only. So once you run this, from ALM side you are all ready and configured. So these two you need to do. This is there in the documentation also. You can always look it up in case you have any questions on what to install, how to install. But yeah, that's it. So from ALM end, you just need to do these two steps.
Okay.
Stop. Go back. Okay.
Okay, and we have some questions in the Q&A panel. Peter asks, so in one report I can see my dev test results, QTP results, and manual testing results.
Okay, one second, let me see that. So in one report, dev test, QC, and so see, in terms of reports, right? So you see that the dev test results are, you can see in dev test, of course. Your QC results, again, so depends on what result you're looking for. As in dev test results are always visible in dev test. In this case, since we are talking about ALM integration, you can see dev test test execution result in dev test as well as in ALM. You're seeing that in both places. Now QTP and manual testing results. So let's say you're doing QTP results, and again, okay, so I get it now. So in ALM, let's say you're tracking your QTP results also and your manual testing results as well as dev test results. Yes. So that's the whole idea, that you can see all of those results or reports at one place, which is in your QC. If you're tracking, so if you can track everything at one place that way. So that's the reason why we have this integration, which helps you track the results of dev test execution at QCN.
Okay, we have another question in from Ravi. Will screenshots also get captured as we have in the ALM stuff?
Screenshots. So here what we are doing is typically, again, so screenshots, if you're talking about capturing, so when you run a dev test, you're mostly running headless test, right? Because you're basically running, let's say in this case I ran against a web service, so there are no screenshots involved. Now one point is, again, so what if you run a Selenium test? So that I'll have to double check on that because that is the only place where we actually capture the screenshots, because when you're running a headless test, obviously there's no point of a screenshot there, right? So
okay. RK asks, is the result viewed on DevTest from the ALM instance accessed on that system?
Result view. Can you please repeat that? Sorry. Melanie, can you please repeat that? I don't think I quite caught all that.
Okay, so RK Hadi at 1127 asks, is the result viewed on DevTest is from the ALM instance accessed on that system? We can always come back to it later.
Yeah, so the result, see the results that we are seeing is basically when you ran a test, what I have shown you is that you are seeing the result on ALM, and for the same test, I mean since we are running a DevTest test as ALM test, you are able to see the DevTest results also. I mean from DevTest also you can see the results, because what it's really doing is, like I showed in the flow, when you run a test from ALM, it's actually staging a test onto your just like your DevTest test, it's staging it, and you are getting the report and report as well as test execution details in DevTest also.
Okay, we have another question in from Mona Lisa. ALM plugin should be installed in the servers or at all the workstations?
Okay, so ALM plugin, wherever you have your DevTest workstation or where the tests are, so wherever, so basically you are creating your tests in your, wherever you have your workstation, right? So there you need to install it so that, when you create the test, the plugin will be available, and when they run the test can be, when you run from ALM, it will be able to pick up the path. So basically wherever you are providing a path for your test cases, right? So there you need to have, in the sense, whichever machine you have your, where you have created the test and you're storing them. So there you need to have that plugin installed, which is basically, I'm assuming where you'll have your DevTest installation, right? So that's where you need the plugin installed.
Okay. Can we provide the version control path where we've saved our DevTest tests? As in when we update the .tst and save it into version control, we had to remove the .tst attached to the QC earlier.
Okay, version control path. I mean, as long as it's accessible to DevTest. So, I mean, I'll have to do a little more research to see if anything additional needs to be done. But, I mean, I don't see a reason why, I mean, as long as your ALM server is able to access a path where you have stored the file, shouldn't be a problem. But, I mean, I can always double check on version control and providing the path to your DevTest tests on version control.
All right, and we have a question specific to DevTest. So let me know if you can answer it now or we should follow up on it later. Can we test REST requests configured in AWS environments?
REST requests configured in AWS, okay. I mean, so I'm assuming that you have your DevTest installed in your AWS and you have, let's say, a REST application test created. In that case, as long as your QC server is able to access those paths does have access to your AWS and is able to pick those files, it should be able to run that, because but you need to have connectivity between your ALM server and your AWS environment, and it should be able to actually pick those files up. So we need to make sure if any ports need to be open for that, those need to be opened. So that would be the, but otherwise I don't see why it cannot.
Okay, lots of questions coming in here. Mona Lisa asks, as we need to have the plugin in all workstations, does this mean we can't use a test case which is created in the DevTest portal in ALM?
DevTest portal. So you have a DevTest portal instance in ALM server? Is that what you mean? If that is the case, so you have a DevTest installation wherever you have the portal running, you have the DevTest installation, right? So there you need to have the plugin installed. I mean, so portal, even though you open on your ALM server or whatever, the portal is actually installed somewhere, right? Where you have your DevTest installation, there you need to have the plugin installed. Yeah, you can always attach a MAR file instead of a config XML test and staging doc. MAR file, you can always attach that also.
Okay, can we attach the MAR file instead of the conf.xml, TST, and STG documents?
Yeah, I mentioned that. Yeah, you can always attach MAR file, yes.
RK has a clarification from the question earlier. I wanted to know if, say, from System A, I am accessing the ALM and running the VAPI XP script as part of the test run, then in System B DevTest instance, I can see the test results, or in System A DevTest instance?
Oh, System B, you can see the DevTest results. For example, right now, I'm running ALM on some server somewhere, and I'm running my DevTest test in my local machine, right? So these two are on different places. My DevTest installation is in a different place, and ALM instance is in a different place. See, that's why you're giving a path, and you're providing the host of your DevTest. See, I showed you that we configure the DevTest connection properties. Let me just forward. So in your DevTest connection.properties, you're providing the details of the DevTest host. You're providing the details of the coordinator name and all that, right? So that's how you're linking your ALM to your DevTest. So that's where you provide those details. So yes, they can be on different servers. System A, System B. That's quite possible. Yes, they don't have to be on the same machine.
Okay, any other questions, guys? Once again, you can ask your question in the Q&A box in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, or if you'd like to ask a question over the phone, you can click #6 on your telephone keypad to unmute yourself.
Yeah, and if you feel you have more questions, I would say you can definitely post it on the communities. We have, I think there are a lot of members even from CA. We keep checking it constantly, so you can get some help around that. Or if you feel any of my answers haven't clarified the question completely, feel free to post there, or you can drop me a note, and we can discuss on that offline.
Great, thanks, Surya.
Yeah, I have one question.
Oh, go ahead.
See, I'm trying to compare UFT and the ALM setup as well as the DevTest and the ALM setup. Okay, for example, for API testing, we can set up the request response details in UFT, and it will automatically generate test cases in ALM while I run the API the API setup. It will automatically generate test cases in ALM. So is it the same case for DevTest also? For example, if I go to DevTest and configure all my API details, once I start run that API, will it automatically connect, ALM and generate test cases?
Okay, so here basically what you are doing is
majorly I'm talking about the API stuff, API testing.
Yeah, so your API test that you've created in DevTest. So for example, let's say you have 5 or 6 different API calls, and let's say you have tests created in DevTest for that. Using your app test, let's say you've created tests for that, for all of these API calls. You can always configure them to run in QC. You can just, like I said, provide the MAR files path, or provide the paths to these test cases, and you can run the QC test, which will in turn trigger these DevTest tests. If you look at it, the actual execution of tests, although it's happening through QC, it's actually happening within the DevTest environment. They're getting staged and run by DevTest itself, and you're getting the results back.
Yeah, I'm telling about the reverse order. All you are saying, we can run the DevTest, from QC. So my question is, from DevTest, okay, if I run my, API stuff, will it connect into QC? I'm asking about the reverse way.
Oh,
will it connect to the QC?
Okay. So I'm assuming this API is to perform certain functions on QC, right? So you're talking about API which is exposed by ALM, right? Which helps you do some certain functions on ALM. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So DevTest, you can always trigger any API, right? So let's say you have an API that does certain functions on ALM, like let's say create setup test or whatever. You can always create a API call in DevTest, and you can trigger them. That is possible.
Okay.
Because it's just an API call. In app test, you can trigger API calls. It can be an API call for one of your SORs. It can be an API call exposed by ALM, or it can be API exposed by some other system. You can trigger the API from DevTest, definitely.
Okay, we had a few more questions come in. We have a question, is it a best practice to attach the test files that are Is it a best practice to attach the test files or provided the test links?
So I always provide the link, like the URL basically as an attachment. I do that, but I can double check on that if we have certain recommendation from CA perspective. So I'll have to double check on that.
Okay. David asks, can we use Python to trigger tests?
Python. So at this time, out of box, CA provides JavaScript and VBScript scripts to trigger the tests. So that's what is provided out of box. I've not heard of any Python scripts which are provided out of box from when you install ALM. But yeah, you can always check with the team if you have a certain requirement. If VBScript or JavaScript doesn't answer your help you with whatever you need, you can always check. But out of box, that's what is provided: VBScript and JavaScript.
Okay. How about tracking the defects logged in other tools like RTC or Jira with ALM?
Again, so I'm not talking about from ALM perspective. I'm talking more from DevTest perspective, right? So, I don't know if I'll be able if I can answer to what can be done within ALM as such.
And then one more question regarding CI/CD. CA Nolio is our deployment tool, and we would like to run smoke tests and dev tests after deployment and store the results in ALM. Do you have any recommendation on how to achieve this?
Is your deployment tool and smoke test and dev test after deployment? I think this is something which probably has to be discussed offline.
Okay, I think that's it for now on questions. As Surya said before, if you guys have any questions following this session, you can always put a question in the community and one of our experts will get back to you as soon as possible. Or you can, either reach out to myself or Surya offline for help with any additional questions that you have. We will be posting the recording, the slides, and the Q&A transcripts. We had a lot of questions today, so give us a little bit to get the Q&A transcript up there. Just want to make sure everything is in there correctly, but we will be posting that. Surya, any closing statements before we close the call out?
I think, I would definitely say take advantage of the communities. You can post any questions that you have, and you'll definitely get help. So I would definitely recommend that you all register on communities if you have not done so already. And, post your ideas, issues, comments, whatever that you have. So that's a great place to interact with us. So.
Okay, great. I put a poll out. If you guys could please let us know what you thought of today's topic. We'll take your feedback back and use that when we plan out future sessions. We do have a few more DevTest webcasts coming up this month. We have custom pattern matching on service virtualization coming up. And if you're located in Europe, we do have a user group conference coming up in February as well. If you're interested in either of those events, you can head to the DevTest community and RSVP for them now. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Surya, for a great presentation today. And keep an eye out in the community for that recording and Q&A transcript later today. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks everyone.